Jean is here this week, so you're all saved from me. See that? You've got a big fan base, much bigger than last week. So and Jean will be here in August also, once I totally straighten out when the what what dates they are. Let us join in the call to worship. Trust in the Lord with all your heart.
Lean not on your own understanding.
In all your ways acknowledge him.
And he will direct your path.
And the opening hymn is Trust and Obey, number 467. As the organist goes and plays our thing here. You'd think after 4 verses I could get the last one right. Let us all be in an attitude of prayer. Well, actually, I can ask for prayers now too. If there's anybody that has prayers. No. Okay. We'll pray for the Ukraine and for a little bit of peace. Let us all be in. Okay, Susan. Yeah.
Continue prayers for Pastor Calvin and for Ribos and Robbie.
Yeah. Oh, yes. He's not better yet, huh? Not here.
Better, but he's testing positive still.
Oh. Carol's daughter, Lori. Okay. Oh.
And we need to pray for President Biden. Prayers,
Lori.
My husband and I is waiting to test my biopsy.
Let us all be in a moment of prayer. Oh Lord, help us as we go through this week, particularly with Calvin and Joanne and Ron and Rob, with Carol's daughter, Lori, and the anxiety that biopsies make in you. Let just give us peace and help President Biden in his personal struggles and the struggles with the nation, and help us to find peace in the world, and help our leaders show us how to get to that peace. This we ask. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. After this, Jean will take over, so now's the time for me to, on the screen, you'll see the giving thing, so you can send your money to box 422, or you can text it if you're real clever and have a phone that texts like that. Now I will turn everything over to Jean, so she's all.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good to be here.
Good to have you.
You may notice I'm dressed a little more casually. I woke up and said, I will die in this heat. Next Saturday, my daughter and the kids and some friends want to go down to Hammonasset. So I said, so I'm buying one of those tents you can put on the beach and take a portable battery-driven fan with me. So I said, if you're looking for me, I'll be in that tent hiding. Now, I did bring with me today, I have an envelope, and it's prayers. It's a prayer written by David Jeremiah, he's a preacher on the TV, but it's a wonderful prayer. It's a prayer for the nation. So I made copies, and I'll give them, and you can each take one, take two, take three, if you'd like, and share them, because we certainly do need to pray for our nation. And it's a very, it's succinct, but it's very meaningful. I've been trying to, in obedience, pray it each day, and it's not just repeating words. If you read them and you really engage in that prayer, you understand what you're asking God to do for this country, because really He is the way to get us through this. He's the only resolution we have for any of our leaders and for ourselves. So today I'm going to read to you from 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 14, or maybe a little further. I'm not sure. I haven't made up my mind yet. So now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now, bands from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would be cured from his leprosy." Naaman went to his master and told him about what the girl had said. "By all means go," the king of Aram said. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver. 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter that he took to the king of Israel read, "With this letter, I am sending my servant Naaman to you so that you may cure him of his leprosy." As soon as the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his robes and said, "Am I God? Can I kill and bring back to life? Why does this fellow send someone to me to be cured of his leprosy? See how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me." When Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his robes, he sent him this message: "Why have you torn your robes? Have the man come to me, and he will know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a messenger to say to him, "Go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan, and your flesh will be restored, and you will be cleansed." But Naaman went away angry and said, "I thought he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Papar, the rivers of Damascus, better than the river waters of Israel? Can't I wash in them and be cleansed?" So he turned and went off in rage. Naaman's servants went to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great thing, would you not have done it? How much more then, when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel." This is the word of God for the people of God. So today I want to talk about obedience. I told this friend of mine, she said, "Well, what's the word for tomorrow?" I said, "Obedience." She said, "I'm glad I ain't gonna be there." I said, "Deborah, what an attitude, you know?" But I always like to, it helps sometimes to have fresh in our minds, a definition of the word itself. And obedience means complying or willing to comply with orders or requests. But this is the part that I really want us to focus on: submission to the will of another. And really, we're talking about, when we say another, we mean the other, God. Submission to his will. There's a lot of kinds of obedience. You know, we have this thing with our kids in obedience. We have laws that we need to obey unless we want to be made miserable or make ourselves miserable by our actions. But this is obedience to God. Years ago, in a midweek worship, my dear friend Bob Leach shared the following quote that is credited to Tom Story. He's a pastor and a life coach. And this is what he said: "Someone is waiting on the other side of your obedience." Now, I heard him say that, and I have never forgotten it. I wrote it in my Bible. I have it in my notes on my phone, and it's really written on my heart. Someone is waiting on the other side of my obedience. So that's what I want to talk about. It took my breath away, and I have never forgotten it. I have never heard a better definition of ministry. Isn't that concise? Isn't that a definition of what the ministry of the church is about? There are people who are waiting on the other side of our obedience. So I thought I would begin by, let's take another look. This is kind of a paraphrase of what I just read. So anyway, it begins with the plight of Naaman. Whoa, poor Naaman. He's obviously a man of prestige and highly respected, and his position with the king of Aram. Aram is actually Syria, and has a high position in the army there. He, however, has leprosy, and leprosy, meant that you were put away from everyone else. And so when his leprosy began, he realized that his position and his status in the kingdom of Syria was going to soon be gone. And in his household, he had a captive slave girl who happened to be an Israelite, who said to his wife, listen, he can be healed. If he goes and sees the prophet of Israel, he'll be healed if he does what the prophet tells him to do. That was risky business. That was risky for her to say something like, just go over to the Israelites. The Syrians did not worship the God of Israel. They were idolaters. They had their own gods. They didn't believe in the God of Israel. And in reality, when she said that, she was putting her life on the line. He could have just said, don't tell me to go to Israel and ask their God for help. And he could have had her done away with. But obviously, Naaman and his wife, this was a big deal. Their lives were hanging on this. He has leprosy. He's got to be healed, or we're out of the picture here. And all that we've worked for and wanted will be taken away. So they go to the king and they ask, for permission. They had to ask for permission of the king of Syria to go to Israel and see the prophet, or to see the king first of Israel. So the king of Syria writes a letter, and he said, here, take this letter that approves that I'm saying it's okay, do whatever when you get to Israel to get yourself well. So he takes the letter, but when he gets there, the king of Israel, when he reads the letter, he feels it's a threat. He fears that this is a trap against him. And he even says, what is this? I'm not God. I can't heal him. What am I going to do? But then the prophet Elisha hears that the king is terrified and tells them, calm the king down. It's okay. Send Naaman over here to see me. Have him come see me. Now, I love this part of the story. So Naaman, in anticipation of seeing the prophet, he figures he's going to get there, and this prophet is just going to come out with fancy robes and everything, make a big scene, and then heal him, put his hand over him and heal him. I love this. So what does the prophet do? He sends a messenger. He doesn't even go himself. What an offense to this big fancy guy. He didn't even come out of his house. He says, hey, go tell this guy, go wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan and you'll be cured. So Naaman's response is, what? Come on, you gotta be kidding me. I'm a very important person. I thought he would come out here and we'd have a big ceremony and everybody would see it. He'd wave his hand over me and then I'd be healed. And hey, in Damascus, we have clean rivers. I could go dip myself in those rivers. Why the Jordan? It's muddy and it's unappealing and I don't want to do it. So he takes off and he's in a huff. But then in obedience, his servants, now when his servants are in obedience to talk to him, they're risking their own lives as well, because that's the way it was. If the master said it, you did it. If you opposed it, your life was at risk. But they said to him, go and wash yourself and be cleansed. I have this picture. They're probably saying, get over yourself, move on. You want to be cured or not? Just go and dip yourself in the dirty water, for Pete's sakes. So the result is that he does that. And sure enough, the prophet's words are fulfilled and he's cleansed. And the result of this is really good. The result of the slave girl's original obedience, this is what happens. The prophet, so Naaman offers the prophet a gift. He said, please accept now a gift from me. And the prophet answers, as surely as the Lord lives, who I serve, I will not accept a thing. And even though Naaman urged him, he refused. So then this is what Naaman says, okay, if you won't accept a gift from me, let me, your servant, be given as much earth as a pair of mules can carry. For your servant will never again make burnt offerings and sacrifices to another God, but only to the Lord. That slave girl's obedience took Naaman away from idolatry and brought him to the true God, to the God of Israel. And that's why he wanted that ground. What he knew when he returned to Syria, the worship was still going on there. And he thought of the ground in Israel as holy ground. So he would take it home and he would stand on that holy ground and worship the God of Israel. Boy, that's a pretty great story. It's pretty amazing that a slave girl says, hey, go see the prophet. And Naaman ends up with his heart turned to the living God. That's why I love this story so much. So that was the result of the slave girl's obedience. So as I looked at this story, I was struck by three things. The first, obedience can be risky business, can't it? Second, obedience requires humility. Even the king of Israel was humble enough to say, I'm not God. And Elisha the prophet didn't come out and make himself look like some big guy. Here I am, I'm the healer, look at me. Sometimes, I don't know if any of you watch any of the TV shows, but worship on the TV where they have thousands of people there. I always get a little uncomfortable because there seems to be a sense that the person that's sharing is really the big guy, see? And everybody's so impressed and enthralled with him. That's why I always loved Billy Graham. No big show about him. I remember when he came to Hartford, and a bunch of us went over. And when they introduced him, everybody stood up and started clapping, and he did not come out onto the stage. And one of the people that worked with him said, would everyone please be seated and stop clapping? Reverend Graham would like you to know that the only one you should stand up and applaud is the Lord your God. So sit down. Really amazing man. But anyway, so it takes humility. It has to be not my way, but God's way. And the third requirement is obedience always results. When we're obedient to God, it always results that he will get the glory. What happened at the end? Naaman went from being an idolater to worshiping the living God. Risky business. Let's start there. It can be costly. Unlike the servant, the young slave girl and the servants of Naaman, really not often do we, I don't know, my life has never been in a place of being at risk. But I have friends who are missionaries. I have one friend who escaped from Afghanistan. He and his wife and daughter were in Afghanistan at the time of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Well, he was there. She had already left because she was coming back to the States. And so she had already left, but he was there. And he did not want to leave his friends without help in getting out of there. He made it out in the very last flight. He made it out of Afghanistan. He risked his life because he loved his friends there, and he wanted to see them be delivered safely. It was a very stressful time for Bakerville Methodist Church. We were praying that he'd be home safely. I have another friend who is my friend Lori is a missionary in Venezuela. She teaches at a seminary there. And Venezuela has a reputation for not having anything. She told me, she texts or emails, she stood in line for 8.5 hours to get a bag of flour. Food is, there's just not the food. The shelves are bare. And in addition to all of that, she's diabetic. So it's very hard for her sometimes to get her medication. And I said to her one time, Laura, come home. Just come home. She's been there near 30 years now. She said, you don't understand. I am home. And she's willing every day to risk her life for those people. But sometimes the risk that we take is in relationships, don't you think? If you stand up and tell someone the truth or try to help someone, a lot of times obedience to God risks that relationship. Someone can get really ticked at you for what you say. Well, I had an experience one time. Well, it was a friend of mine and I. This gentleman that went to our church, his wife had been very ill, and he had a lot of bills, and he needed a loan. So my friends co-signed the loan with him, and he did very well paying it off for the first couple of years. But then he got sick. And because my friend was a co-signer of the loan, he got the notice that the loan was in arrears. So he said, what do you think we should do? I said, well, let's write him a letter and see if we can find out what's going on. And he said, okay, so we wrote him a letter, no response. So I called my pastor and I said, George, do you know what's happening? Is he ill? What's happening? And he said, who's co-signed that loan? They shouldn't have done that without asking me. I said, George, I'm not asking for it. He said, okay, I'll go with you and we'll talk to him. I said, no, you won't, because you're now the Papa Bear and you want to protect him or protect the guy that's co-signed the loan. So anyway, we finally made contact. We went and we saw him. He had stopped coming to church. He hadn't been to church in 2.5 months. I said, where you been? I'm embarrassed. I'm ashamed. So we looked at the loan, and this is what happened. God is so good. I said, let's go to the bank. They'll rewrite the loan. You rewrite it for another 3 years, and the payments will be half. Can you do that? He said, yeah, I'm working part-time. I can do that. You see, he was waiting on the other side of my friend's obedience. My friend said, well, maybe I should just pay it off. And I said, I don't think so. I think we'll lose him because he'll be so embarrassed and so ashamed that he couldn't pay his loan. So we prayed about it, and we went and we saw him, and he rewrote the loan. And the next Sunday he was in church. And God got the glory because God won. I love it when God lets you take part like that. It also requires humility. There was a risk there that my friend could have lost his buddy in the whole thing if it wasn't done the right way, God's way, in obedience to God. But there's also God's way, not my way, when it has to be, you have to be humble. You know, Elisha was certainly humble. He didn't come busting out there like the big guy. And Naaman had a little struggle with his humility. And I think we all struggle with a little humility sometimes, don't we? Don't you sometimes want to be, here I am, I'm obeying God. See what I'm doing? You like it? Look at me. Well, one time, you know, a lot of times we don't realize that the unseen actions of obedience are the ones that will still serve the one who's waiting. Nobody has to see what your actions are. In Matthew, you know, it says, don't make a big display. Just do it. Just give, just serve. You don't have to be its center of attention. And one time I remember we had this group, this study group, and I went to the study group, and they had all marched off into a separate room with this young woman who was having a great deal of distress at the time. And, you know, I wasn't present when they marched off. I walked in and said, where is everyone? And someone said, we're in here. We're doing a little counseling. I said, oh, all right. So I didn't feel it was appropriate to barge in. So I left and I started driving home. And I did one of those things. Woe is me. I'm left out. I'm not part of what's happening there. I'm not important enough to be in that room with them. Really, all these things are going through my mind. And God clearly said to me, it's not about you, Jean. It's just not about you. And so I stopped my hissy fit and I began to pray. You see, that was the thing. My part was to pray in obedience, to be in partnership with God, and to pray for what was happening in there. What a privilege. You know, they were all together in there, and I know they were, but they needed some support. But they didn't have to see who was giving them that support. They didn't have to know that I was on my way home and I stopped in my car and I stayed there and I prayed for them. In Wesley's prayer, I don't know if any of you have ever heard John Wesley's prayer. I just want to read it to you. It's really, he really talks about the business of being humble. I am no longer my own but thine. Put me to what thou wilt, rank me with whom thou wilt. Put me to doing, put me to suffering. Let me be employed for thee, or laid aside for thee, exalted for thee, or brought low for thee. Let me be full, let me be empty, let me have all things, let me have nothing. I freely and heartily yield all things to thy pleasure and disposal. And now, O glorious and blessed God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, thou art mine and I am thine, so be it. And the covenant which I have made on earth, let it be ratified in heaven. Isn't that something? Let me have all things, let me have nothing. You know, I give all things to your pleasure and disposal, God. I don't have to be the big one, the important one, the noticed one. All I have to be is obedient to your call. It says here, let me be employed for thee or laid aside for thee. During my time of preaching, there were 2 years when I don't think I preached twice, not even that, maybe not at all. And I thought, well, he's laying me aside. And he did lay me aside. And in that 2-year time, there was a lot of, I experienced a lot and I grew a lot. And that's what I needed to do. And I wasn't equipped then to be preaching. So anyway, in the end, God is glorified because Naaman came to a place where he recognized that the God of the prophet of Israel was the only true God, and that the ground that he stood on was holy ground, and that the prophet didn't have to come out, make a big deal over him. And God was glorified. I think, again, talking of Billy Graham, and I really think of him as a true evangelist. You know, he died in the house that they built when they got married. He did not have a big mansion. He didn't have a big church with all the stuff, all the trappings. He left his family many, many times to travel everywhere in the world and to give testimony to Jesus Christ. His obedience cost his wife and children a lot of time with him, but his obedience brought many, many, many souls to know Jesus Christ. And God was, and it continues to be, glorified in them. The impact of Billy Graham's work is incredible. On a more local level, we have the Christian Counseling Connection in Torrington, and about, I don't know, over 20 years ago, five people, I was not a part of that group, began praying for a counseling center that would counsel and would pray with people. And so the Christian Counseling Center was established, and it cost a lot of unpaid hours of work. The counselors we had no money. I'm the treasurer. I was the treasurer then. I said, what do you want me to write down? We got no money. Don't you get it? If you got no money, what do I record as an accountant? But they worked unpaid. They sacrificed to establish the ministry. And that ministry has gone on for 21 years. We have served untold numbers of people. I remember I worked with this one woman, and she and her husband were having a real struggle with their marriage. And it was obvious that they needed to get away from the influence of their families that were not very cooperative in encouraging their marriage and their success in their marriage. And so all I did was say, well, here's a card. You might want to call this friend of mine. Maybe she could help. I don't know, but give it a try. And she called, and 6 months later, they moved to Florida. They have 2 children and a very successful marriage. And I always think about that when I think about the sacrifice that was made back then. There was no charge for her to come because she didn't have anything to give. So anyway, over and over again, we see lives that are changed, and God is glorified because of the obedience, whether it's visible or private, the obedience of someone. Whenever, wherever you and I are obedient to him, we have to take the risk, be humble, but know that in the end, he will be glorified. There has never been any greater obedience than that of Jesus Christ. And it's in looking at him and trusting in him and obeying his command to love one another that someone who's waiting on the other side of your obedience has to wait no longer. Amen. Okay, I think that we have a closing hymn. Jesus calls us. Oh, look. Look. Oh, my word. Calls us what Okay, I'm gonna pass these out. Because I got a whole mess of them. So. Okay. If you want extra ones, I'll leave them.
I'll take it. Maybe more. You can make